What's going on, guys? Alex here. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys a full breakdown of my entire hiring process. This is the exact hiring process I use to hire setters for my clients. And it's the exact hiring process you need to use if you really want to hire A players for your business. So let's get into what I'll actually be covering today. First, we will start off with the foundations that you need to have implemented in your business before you actually start hiring setters. And then I'll actually be breaking down the entire hiring process in full detail. Before we get into this, I actually want to give you guys a little bit of background about who I am, what I've done, and why you should even listen to me in the first place. Right, so my name is Alex Gerov, and over the past 16 months, I've set for guys like Devin Jatto, Adam Polomecu, Nat Young Sala, Suway, PB Investing, Connor, booked over 800 calls and generated over $350,000 in sets closed as a setter. Right, so here you can see a couple of my end of day reports that I was able to generate throughout this time. You can see 8.5K paid in fulls for Suway. This was the time I DM closed Daniel Isles for one of the offers that I was working on. You can see a bunch of other sets closed. This was from the time that I was working with Devin Jatto. From there, I then transitioned to being a setter manager, where I've trained and managed setters for guys like Jeremy Park, Rahul's Fitness, Danny Cavallero, Brian Fahim, and these are a couple of the results that we've also been able to generate for them. As you can see, Rahul, I basically transitioned his VA, that was just the regular VA doing admin tasks, to being able to book 3 qualified calls in a single day. We can see Danny, where he generated $6.4 thousand in a single day with just the SOPs alone. This was before I even started training his setters. With just the customized SOPs that I made for his offer, he was able to generate 6.4K in a single day. And I've also done a bunch of setting consultation calls for guys like Frank, Manx and Fahad, Yusuf, Patrick, Josh, Dominic, Tyler, and many, many more, right? So I think it's pretty safe to say that I have produced pretty good results in the space and that I do know what I'm talking about when it comes to these things. So now let's get into why you actually clicked on the video, which is breaking down the entire process. The first thing you need to implement is the foundations. The foundations is basically where your business needs to be at and the assets you need to have in place before you even think about hiring setters. A big mistake that you could be making right now is trying to hire a setter before your business is actually ready for it. The reason this is a mistake is because you might find a way to hire a setter, but that setter will ultimately end up leaving after 2 weeks because your business simply isn't ready to handle a setter and produce the necessary results that the setter needs in order to stay on your offer. So I'm going to break down all the things you need to have in place before you actually get into hiring a setter. The first thing you need is a good content presence on Instagram and on YouTube. So be posting once a week on YouTube, a couple of times a week on Instagram will be good. Daily stories, also very good. So just having a good content presence where you are posting content on a regular basis. You need to have an optimized funnel. You need to have an optimized top of funnel, middle of funnel, and bottom of funnel. Ideally, the funnel will then lead to the setter picking up that lead in some way, shape, or form. Whether they are calling the lead, whether the lead is opting in and then we messaging the lead, whether the lead is DMing us a keyword, whether the lead is following your Instagram account and then the setter is reaching out to them through a warm outbound message, whatever it is, the setter needs to be picking up that lead. Ideally, you want to be generating 50 to 150 new leads per week, whether that's through organic or through paid ads, doesn't really matter. And you want to have generated 10 client results or have gotten 10 people to your promised result. In terms of if you're a fitness coach that promises for your clients to lose 30 pounds in the first month, you want to have at least 10 people that have achieved that promised result for your offer. Now, when it comes to how your business is doing and your offer, the minimum price point of your offer should be 2K. If you're selling like something for $1,000, 1.5, it's going to be difficult for you to really maintain a setter, because if the setter's on 5% commission and it's a 1K offer, that's $50. It's going to be pretty difficult to actually maintain a setter with those types of commissions. So ideally the minimum would be 2K, and you want to be selling 10 to 15 units per month of your current offer, which will get you to 20K to 30K a month. The reason I wouldn't recommend you trying to hire a setter before you're at 20K a month is simply because if your setter's at 5% commission, the most amount of money he can make is less than 1K if you're at less than 20K. If you're making 10K a month and you're trying to hire a setter, the most amount of money that setter can make is $500. Most setters that have experience, that have invested in their training, aren't going to settle for that. They need to be making at least more than 1K a month in commissions to actually stay on your offer and want to work with you. That is the business side of things. So to summarize, a good content presence, a good funnel, good fulfillment, and then be making at least 20K a month. Now, when it comes to the assets that you need to have in place, you don't need all of these, but this is the perfect environment that you can create for the setter. Like I said, you don't need all of them, but if you really want to create a very good environment for the setter to really create a very good first impression so that they stay in your business long term, these are some of the assets that I'd recommend you have before actually onboarding that setter. The first thing you need is obviously either Slack or Discord, where you'll have all the channels that you need to manage a setter correctly. So you can pick either Slack or Discord, doesn't really matter. Personally, I will prefer Slack because of certain features that Slack allows you to have. After that, you'd want a successful conversation library. This is simply a Google Doc or Google Drive where you have 10 or more successful conversations from when you were booking calls. So when you were booking calls, 10 or more calls that you booked, you basically screen record that conversation and you add it in a Google Drive so that when you hire the setter, you can send them this asset and they can go through your successful conversations and see the way you are setting, see some of the strategies that you used to produce good results and actually book calls. You would want nurturing content. So you would want a VSL in place, you want case studies in place, testimonials in place, right? This will mainly be used in your post-booking process. So when your setter books a call, from the time that that call is booked and the actual date of the call, you essentially perform a post-booking process. In this post-booking process, you warm the lead up. One of the best ways to warm a lead up is by sending them a VSL and case studies or testimonials that are specific to their situation, right? That's why you'd need these assets before you hire setters. Again, you can hire a setter before you've implemented a VSL and testimonials, but to make it way more effective, you would want to have these assets before you hire a setter. Of course, probably the most important thing you need is either Calendly or Go High Level to have a calendar system because you need to book calls somewhere, right? This is pretty self-explanatory. You could also implement automations. So automations in terms of a booked call and an automation that is connected to your Stripe. For booked calls, this will essentially allow the setter to know when a certain lead has booked a call so that they can stop following up with that lead and actually start implementing the post-booking process with that lead. It just makes things more organized. Again, this isn't something you need to have before hiring a setter, but it will just make your account look a lot more professional. Setter application form. This is definitely something you need before you hire setters. This is something you're going to be using in the hiring process that we're going to talk about down here when it actually comes time to hiring setters, sourcing them, and then filtering through your applications. You need a setter contract. In most cases, you need a setter contract. Some offers don't implement setter contracts, but I would recommend you have a contract with your setter just so that their expectations are laid out and they know exactly how they're going to get paid, on what date they're going to get paid, and it just handles a lot of logistical things. Again, it makes your entire offer seem more professional since you have a contract in place. Now, when it comes to SOPs, again, you don't need all of these, but if you can implement all of these, it will make your entire offer seem that much more professional. Ideally, you would want lead revival, inbounds, probably inbounds and warm outbounds are the most important ones that you can have. If you're using free resources, you also want an SOP on that. Story replies, you can have one on that. Follow-ups, how the setter should follow up with leads. Qualified lead criteria is definitely something you need. So you need to give your setter a full breakdown of what is a qualified lead based on your offer and based on your offer's price point and payment plans and things of this nature. This qualification process. If someone isn't qualified, how are we going to disqualify him, cancel the call, and then allow him to save up and come back when he does actually have the money to invest? Post-booking process. This is definitely something you need. Like I said, when the setter books a call, in between the date that the call was booked and the date of the actual sales call, a post-booking process needs to take place where we are warming up the lead and sending them reminders so that you can increase your show-up rate. You need to have that process laid out for the setter. No-show. What are you going to do if someone no-shows? Do you just not message them, or are you going to message them with a specific message that allows them to reschedule but make sure that they will show on that call that they've rescheduled? What is the setter's workflow? What are they expected to do each day? What is their KPIs? How many follow-ups? How many warm outbounds? How should they structure their day? Should they do follow-ups in the morning? Should they focus on doing outbounds in the morning? How should they structure their entire workflow? Again, you don't need all of these. You just need, some of them are very important, like the post-booking process, inbounds, warm outbounds, and the qualified lead criteria are a must. Everything else is just something I would recommend you implement before hiring a setter. Those are the foundations. Most important thing is that you have an optimized funnel, you have proven your fulfillment, you're making at least 20K a month, and then you obviously need a calendar system, an application form, and some of the SOPs so that the setter knows how to perform his job. Once you have these things in place, the foundations are in place, you're making over 20K a month, you've implemented some of the SOPs and you've built out some of the systems, and you are generating leads, that's when you can actually look at hiring your first 1 to 2 setters. The hiring process is essentially split up into 2 phases. You have the sourcing and then you have the interview phase. When it comes to sourcing setters, a big mistake that you probably have made in the past is only trying to source 10 to 20, either through going through your message requests and trying to find setters that have messaged you like a cold outbound message wanting to be your setter, or maybe you post on your story where you say, oh, I'm looking for a setter, and you have like your requirements. If you try those strategies, you'll probably find 10 to 20 people. The reason this isn't as effective as sourcing 50 to 100 people is because of a simple concept called quality within quantity. The more applicants you have to choose from, the larger your pool of applicants, the higher your chances of actually hiring A players. This is a very big thing that you need to kind of understand when it comes to hiring setters and just hiring employees in general. Right? The larger your pool of applicants, the higher your chances of hiring A players. So don't make the mistake of only sourcing 10 to 20 people. You need to source 50 to 100 setters. From there, you get those 50 to 100 applicants to fill out the application form that you've made. They fill out your application form. Then you will go through all the application forms that they filled out, and you'll then pick the applicants that are closest to your ideal setter. The ones that you pick will be 10 to 20 applicants. So you'll go through 50 to 100 and you'll pick or you'll leave the best 10 to 20. Then those 10 to 20 applicants move on to phase 2, which is the interview process. So you're not taking 50 to 100 interviews, you're only taking 10 to 20. But you filtered these interviews from 50 to 100, right? So the first phase of the interview process is a Zoom meeting, just a regular Zoom meeting interview, which will usually last 15 to 20 minutes. Out of those interviews, you will then be left with the top 3 to 4 applicants out of your interviews, right? From those 3 to 4, they then move on to phase 2 of the interview process, which is a mock role play, which is where you will use your inbound and warm outbound SOP that you created to actually run a mock with these 3 to 4 setters. In this mock, you essentially act as the lead and the setter will act as a setter, so you can understand and you can see how this setter that you will potentially hire, how they will execute your script and SOP when it comes time to actually booking calls. Out of the mock role plays, out of these 3 to 4, you will then hire the best 1 or 2 setters. The reason this entire method works so well is because you started with 50 to 100 applicants, and now you're only hiring the best 1 to 2 out of those 50 to 100, instead of only sourcing 10 to 20 and then hiring the best 1 or 2 out of those 10 to 20, right? Again, there is quality within quantity. The larger your pool of setters, the higher your chances of actually finding very, very good setters and finding the person that is the best fit for your offer. Now, once you have essentially figured out the 1 or 2 setters that you want to hire, that are the best fit, that executed the mock role play the best, that are the most motivated to produce results that you figured out in the interview, and you want to get them onboarded. How do you actually go about doing that? Right, so now make sure you actually watch the onboarding phase, because there's no point in you hiring a setter or knowing who you want to hire and then not being able to onboard them correctly and then they still leave. So in terms of onboarding them, there's 2 phases. You need to run them through team logistics and actual setting logistics. Now, let's get into team logistics. The first thing you want them to do is actually sign the contract that you made before starting this entire process. After they've signed the contract, you will then invite them to all the team meetings, right? However many team meetings you're doing per week, whether that's 5, whether that's 7, whether that's 3, you invite them to those team meetings where you're essentially going to be training them and managing them and keeping them accountable. You want to give them access to Slack so they can communicate with you and have access to all the different channels that they are going to book calls in, they're going to be kept accountable in, they're going to give you reports in, they're going to give you just their metrics and where you can really keep them accountable. You obviously want to give them access to your calendar so that when they wake up, they can see how many calls are on your calendar and they can make sure that everyone is qualified. You want to give them access to that successful conversation library that you made so they can look at those 10 plus conversations and understand the way that you were setting and understand the strategies that were actually working for you when you were booking calls. And if you want to build out a Notion dashboard for them that just keeps all the SOPs and all these resources in an organized place, you can also give them access to that. This one isn't that necessary, but again, it just makes your account and offer seem a lot more professional. Those are the team logistics. Then we move on to the actual setting logistics. You want to give them a breakdown of all your SOPs, Ideally, it would be all of these ones, or at least all the ones that you've already made, because they need to understand the entire process, whether that's inbound, warm, outbound. When they book a call, what is the post-booking process that they need to follow? If someone no-shows, what is the process they need to follow to get them to reschedule and make sure that they will actually show up, right? What is the qualified lead criteria for your offer so they can make sure they're only booking qualified calls? What is the workflow that they need to be following each and every day? You need to give this setter a very, very good understanding of all of these things so that they know exactly what they need to be doing on a daily basis to produce the results you want them to produce. From there, you will go into explaining your account logistics in terms of if you give them access to your actual Instagram account. Maybe you say, okay, all the leads, transition them over to the general inbox, and then I'll leave the primary inbox for all my personal contacts. Or you can also use the Instagram labeling system to actually tag leads. Another thing in terms of logistics, if your setter is in a completely different country as to what you're in, they need to use a VPN and connect to your country before logging into your Instagram account so that Instagram isn't suspicious of this login from a completely different country. These are all the logistics that you need to run them through before they actually start setting. You need to, again, explain to them their workflow, how many follow-ups, or that they need to do their follow-ups at the start of the day, or that they need to do the warm outbound at the start of the day, and just all the tasks that they need to complete on each day to actually be able to produce results. What are their KPIs? How many follow-ups, how many warm outbounds, how many new conversations, how many booked calls per day, and then ultimately what is the cash collected goal for that week, for that month, right? You need to give them very clear expectations of what they need to do, of the results they need to produce, and then how they need to produce those results. These are two very important things. If you don't do these two things, everything else that we've just went over is useless. Because if they don't have a very clear expectation of what they are expected to do and how they're going to go about doing that, they won't stay on your offer. I can tell you this from personal experience. I was a setter for 16 months. The offers that I stayed on the longest are the offers where I knew exactly what was expected of me and exactly how I needed to actually produce those results. The last thing you'll run them through is actual data tracking and how you're going to tag leads. So whether you're using the tagging system within Instagram, whether they only have access to your account through ManyChat and you're using ManyChat labels, whether you have a specific pipeline built out in Go High Level, however you choose to track leads, whether it's on a spreadsheet, doesn't really matter. As long as you have a proven process of actually tracking those leads, you need to give them that entire process and explain to them how that process works. After you've done that, that is essentially you've gone from, first of all, implementing all the foundational things you need before hiring a setter. From there, you've taken them through a very diligent hiring process where you've sourced a very large pool of applicants and you've slowly filtered out through each of these phases the best applicants until from these 50 to 100 initial applicants, you're only left with the best 1 to 2 that you can actually hire and onboard. From there, you've taken them through a very detailed onboarding process where they first of all have access to everything that they need to do their job. They understand exactly how they need to do their job, exactly how to structure the conversations, exactly what is expected of them on a day-to-day basis, weekly basis, and monthly basis. What are the exact results that they need to be producing, right? This is essentially the entire process. So it is pretty simple, but you need to do it at a very high quality. If one of these steps are missed, you are basically at the risk of either hiring a setter that isn't the best setter for your offer, or if you don't implement these things, you might be able to hire a setter, but they'll probably leave after 2 weeks because you haven't created an environment that that setter wants to actually stay in, right? Very important. If you guys have any questions about this entire process, you can go on my Instagram at @AlexGerov and just message me any questions you have. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have about this hiring process. And if you also want help actually with me coming into your business and doing this entire process for you in terms of building out the systems, building out all of these SOPs, and then sourcing 50 to 100 applicants, building out your application form specific to your offer, then screening through all these applicants to be left with the top 10 to 20, taking all the interviews for you until I'm left with the best 3 to 4, and then running the mocks for you, and ultimately getting left with the best 1 to 2 setters for your offer that I will then take through the entire onboarding process. What I want you to do is book a call with me down in the description, where first we'll have a conversation where I'll give you a full consultation call on what you need help with in terms of your entire setting system. And then if it is a good fit for us to work together, if you have some of these things already implemented, we can then go ahead and talk about how I can come in, help you with, first of all, this entire process, but then also 5 other processes. Because this hiring and onboarding your team is only the first phase of my 5-phase program. So if that sounds something that you're interested in, go down in the description, book a call with me, and I'll talk to you there.